The tomato plants needed watering. Daniel Reeves knelt in the dirt of his small garden, checking each vine for ripeness. His hands worked the soil with practiced ease, finding peace in the simple rhythm of growth and harvest. 20 years of war had taught him to appreciate quiet moments like these. No orders to follow, no lives depending on his next decision. Just him, the earth, and vegetables that grew without asking questions. The shadow fell across his garden before he heard the engines. Daniel looked up to see an Imperial Corvette descending toward his field, its massive hull blocking out the afternoon sun. He sighed and stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Nothing good ever came from Imperial visits to frontier colonies like New Haven. The ship landed with surprising gentleness, barely disturbing his carefully tended rows. A boarding ramp extended and a single figure emerged. The alien was reptilian, covered in green scales that caught the light. He wore formal diplomatic robes and carried himself with the nervous energy of someone delivering bad news. "Daniel Reeves," the alien called out, his voice tight with tension. "That would be me," Daniel replied, walking toward the ship. "What brings an Imperial diplomat to my garden?" The alien's throat sacs inflated and deflated rapidly, a sign of extreme anxiety in his species. "My name is Ambassador Torin. I bring a summons from the Dragon Empress herself." Daniel stopped walking. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Dragon Empress. Celera had ruled the Ashelon Empire for 60 standard years with absolute power. Her temper was legendary. Her mercy was non-existent. Entire planets had been conquered because someone looked at her wrong. "I pay my taxes on time," Daniel said carefully. "I have not broken any Imperial laws." "You are not in trouble," Torin said quickly. "Quite the opposite. The Empress has selected you as a potential consort." Daniel stared at the ambassador for a long moment. Then he started laughing. It was not a happy sound. "You are joking." "I wish I were." Torin pulled out a data pad and showed Daniel an official document, sealed with the Imperial crest. "Your name was chosen from among thousands of candidates across hundreds of worlds. It is a great honor." "It is a death sentence," Daniel corrected. "Everyone knows what happens to the Empress's husbands." "How many has she had? 6, 7, 9, Torin admitted quietly. "The longest one lasted 5 months before he went completely insane. The shortest lasted 3 weeks before he died under mysterious circumstances. Most simply vanish or flee in terror within the first month." "And you want me to volunteer for this?" Daniel shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, but I will pass. I have seen enough violence for one lifetime." "Imperial law requires you to at least attend the formal introduction ceremony," Torin said apologetically. "You may decline at that time, but you must appear before the Empress in person." Refusal to attend is considered an insult to the throne. Daniel looked back at his garden, at the peaceful life he had built for himself. He had left the military precisely to avoid this kind of complication. But he also knew that insulting the Dragon Empress was a fast way to lose everything, including his head. "How long will this take?" he asked. 3 days travel to the capital world of Drakmor. 1 day for the ceremony. 3 days back. 1 week total, assuming you survive the meeting. You are not making this sound appealing. "I am trying to be honest," Torin said. "The Empress is not someone who tolerates deception. If you come, you should understand what you are walking into." Daniel made his decision. 1 week. He could handle 1 week. He had survived worse. "Fine, let me pack a bag." The journey to Drakmor was educational in all the wrong ways. Torin seemed compelled to share every terrible story about the Empress. How she had executed an entire noble house for plotting against her. How she could shift between humanoid and full dragon form at will. How her golden eyes could see through any lie. How the last husband had been found curled in a corner, whispering nonsense about fire and scales. "You are really selling this opportunity," Daniel said dryly on the second day of travel. "You deserve to know what you are facing," Torin replied. "The Empress has ruled through fear and power for decades. She trusts no one. She considers everyone either a threat or a tool. Living with that kind of constant suspicion would break anyone. So why does she keep taking husbands if they all fail?" Torin was quiet for a moment. "Imperial law requires the Empress to maintain the possibility of an heir. She must periodically select a consort. But I think part of her hopes someone will be different, someone who will not break or betray her." "That is almost sad," Daniel said. "Do not let sympathy make you careless," Torin warned. "The Empress may be lonely, But she is still the most dangerous being in the galaxy. One wrong word, one perceived insult, and you will not leave that throne room alive. On the third day, they reached Drakmor. The planet was a fortress world, covered in military installations and defensive platforms. The Imperial Palace sat inside a dormant volcano, its black stone walls rising like teeth from the mountain. Daniel noted the excessive security, the armed patrols, the way every entrance had multiple checkpoints. This was not the home of a beloved ruler. This was the fortress of someone who expected attack from every direction, every moment of every day. Torin led him through corridors of polished obsidian to a waiting chamber. The Empress will see you within the hour. Remember, show respect but not fear. Answer honestly but carefully. And whatever you do not try to impress her with false bravado. She has killed people for less. Daniel sat alone in the chamber, surrounded by wealth and power that meant nothing to him. He thought about his garden, about the simple life he would return to in a few days. All he had to do was survive one meeting with the most feared being in the galaxy. How hard could that be? The private throne room was smaller than Daniel expected. No crowds of nobles. No grand displays of wealth. Just a circular chamber carved from volcanic rock, lit by crystals that pulsed with inner fire. And in the center, sitting on a throne of black stone, was the Dragon Empress. Silera was tall in her humanoid form, with scales that shimmered like rubies in the crystal light. Her golden eyes tracked Daniel's every movement as he entered. She wore armor that looked ceremonial but Daniel recognized as functional, designed for both beauty and battle. Her presence filled the room like heat from a forge. "Leave us," she commanded. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Ambassador Torin bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor, then practically ran from the chamber. The massive doors closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing. Daniel stood alone before the most powerful being in the Empire. "You are shorter than I expected," Silera said, studying him with those unnerving golden eyes. "You are exactly as terrifying as advertised," Daniel replied. The Empress tilted her head slightly, surprised. "You are not afraid. I did not say that. I said you are terrifying. Those are different things." "Explain." Daniel chose his words carefully. "Fear is useful in combat. It keeps you alert, makes you cautious. But being afraid of someone across a room accomplishes nothing. So I acknowledge you are dangerous and I deal with reality as it is." Silera stood from her throne and descended the steps toward him. Each movement was controlled, predatory. She circled him slowly, examining him from every angle. The others trembled, some wept, one fainted. "The others wanted something from you," Daniel said. "Power, status, wealth. I want none of those things." "Then why did you come?" "Because imperial law required it, and because insulting you seemed unwise." The Empress stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her scales. "What do you want, human?" "To go home to my garden." For the first time, something like confusion crossed her face. "You truly mean that?" "Yes." Silera studied him for another long moment. Then her form began to shift. Her body expanded, scales spreading across her skin. Wings erupted from her back. Her face elongated into a draconic snout filled with teeth like swords. In seconds she stood before him in her full dragon form, massive and terrible, a creature of pure predatory power. Daniel watched the transformation with professional interest. That is impressive control. Most shapeshifters show some hesitation during the change. You moved through it like breathing. The Dragon Empress blinked her enormous golden eyes. She had expected screaming or fainting or the usual terror. Instead, this human was critiquing her technique like a weapons instructor. She shifted back to humanoid form, looking genuinely puzzled. "You have seen much combat, 20 years worth. Multiple campaigns, dozens of worlds. I have faced things that wanted to kill me in creative ways. You have not tried to kill me yet, so this is actually a pleasant conversation by comparison." "Yet?" Silera repeated, almost amused. "You assume I might. You have killed 9 husbands, according to the rumors." "I have killed none of my consorts," the Empress said coldly. "They destroyed themselves. How?" The question seemed to catch her off guard again. "What do you mean?" Daniel gestured around the chamber. "This palace is a fortress. Your security is designed not just to protect you, but to isolate you. Every person who enters your presence is terrified. You never relax, never rest, never let your guard down. Living with someone in constant combat mode would break anyone eventually. They probably snapped under the pressure of your vigilance. Solara's golden eyes widened slightly. You think I drove them mad through caution? Through necessity, Daniel corrected gently. You survived something terrible. You built walls to protect yourself. But walls that keep enemies out also keep everyone out. Your husbands were probably decent people who could not handle living in a permanent war zone. The Empress was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. You are the first person in 60 years to speak to me as an equal rather than a threat or a subject. That is sad. It is survival. She returned to her throne and sat, studying him with new intensity. I will make you an offer, Daniel Reeves. Stay for 1 month. Live in the palace. Learn what it means to be near me. If after 30 days you still wish to leave, I will grant you anything you desire. Wealth, land, titles, anything within my power. And if I break like the others, then you get nothing and I add another failure to my collection. Daniel considered the offer. He could refuse and go home immediately. The safe choice. The smart choice. But looking at Solara, he saw something he recognized. A fellow soldier trapped in a war that never ended, held rigid by the armor they could not remove. He had been that person once, 1 month, he agreed. But I have conditions. The Empress raised one scaled eyebrow. You dare negotiate? You asked me to stay. I am agreeing. But I will not pretend to be something I am not. I will treat you with respect, but not worship. I will be honest, but not cruel. And if I see you making mistakes, I will say so. Solara leaned forward on her throne, a predatory smile crossing her face. You are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Daniel admitted. Most soldiers are, the Empress laughed. It was a short surprise sound, as if she had forgotten how. Very well. You may stay. Ambassador Torren will show you to your quarters. We will dine together tonight. I look forward to it. As Daniel turned to leave, Solara called out, Human, why did you really agree? He looked back at her, this powerful being wrapped in scales and suspicion. Because I recognize someone who is surviving instead of living. I did that for years. It is a terrible way to exist. The doors opened and Daniel left the throne room. Behind him, the Dragon Empress sat alone, staring at the space where he had stood, feeling something she had not experienced in decades. Curiosity. The servants assigned to Daniel expected cruelty. Previous consorts had treated palace staff like furniture at best, punching bags at worst. Power went to people's heads quickly in the imperial palace, so when Daniel thanked them by name, asked about their duties, and insisted on making his own bed, they assumed it was an elaborate joke before some terrible punishment. It took 3 days before they realized he was simply being decent. You really do not need to carry those. Daniel told a young servant named Rila, who was struggling with his laundry. I can handle my own clothes. Rila looked terrified. But sir, it is my duty. Then let me help. 2 people can carry more than one. Word spread through the palace like wildfire. The new consort was strange. He walked the corridors alone without guards. He ate in the kitchen sometimes, talking to the cooks. He learned names, he smiled. It was deeply unsettling. Daniel used his freedom to observe. The palace was a masterpiece of military architecture, but it was also a prison. Every corridor had sight lines designed for defense. Guard rotations never left gaps. The Empress's personal chambers had 6 layers of security. And Solara herself never stopped working. He found her 3 nights in a row, long after midnight, still reviewing reports in her study. Stacks of data pads covered her desk. Intelligence briefings, economic analyses, military deployments, criminal investigations. She read everything, approved everything, controlled everything. Do you ever sleep? Daniel asked from the doorway on the 3rd night. Solara looked up, her golden eyes tired but alert. 4 hours per night. Sufficient for my species. Sufficient for survival. Not for living well. He entered the study uninvited and glanced at the reports. Border dispute with the Kelton Federation? They are testing our response times on the outer colonies. She gestured to a star map. 3 probing raids in the past month. Daniel studied the map with a soldier's eye. They are not testing response times. They are mapping your patrol routes. See the pattern? Each raid happens exactly between shift changes. Someone on the inside is feeding them information. Solara stood abruptly and moved to the map, recalculating. Her eyes widened slightly. You are correct. How did you see that so quickly? I ran patrols for 2 years on the Rigel frontier. Pirates used the same tactic. Find the gaps, exploit the patterns. He pointed to 3 systems. If I were planning an invasion, I would hit here, here, and here simultaneously during your next major fleet rotation. The Empress studied the map with new intensity, running calculations. This changes our defensive posture entirely. They spent the next 3 hours discussing military theory. Solara was brilliant, her strategic mind honed by decades of warfare. But Daniel brought perspective from the ground level, from the soldier who lived with the consequences of command decisions. For the first time in years, Solara found herself in a conversation where she learned as much as she taught. You should have been a general, she said as dawnlight began filtering through the windows. I was offered the rank twice, declined both times. Daniel stretched, his back popping. Generals make decisions. Soldiers live with them. I preferred understanding both sides. Most officers never learn that lesson. Most officers never carry their own wounded off the battlefield. Solara was quiet for a moment. You have seen terrible things. So have you. It was not a question. The Empress looked at him sharply, her scales catching the early light. What makes you say that? Everything about this palace screams trauma response. Excessive security. Constant vigilance. Trust no one. Sleep light. Never relax. Daniel's voice was gentle but direct. You built a fortress because something taught you the world was full of enemies. It is full of enemies, some of the time. But treating everyone like an enemy means you never find friends. Solara's expression hardened. Friends are liabilities. They betray you when it becomes convenient. Some do, but loneliness is its own kind of death. Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. My third tour, I stopped trusting anyone. Kept everyone at arm's length. Figured it was safer. By the end, I realized I had survived the war but lost myself in the process. Took years to find my way back, and did you? Solara asked quietly. Find your way back? Still working on it. But the first step was admitting I was trapped in a war that ended years ago. He looked back at her. You have been fighting for 60 years. Maybe it is time to acknowledge some battles are over. After he left, Solara sat alone in her study as true morning arrived. She thought about his words. About the wars she had fought. About the civil conflict that had killed her family and forced her to take the throne at 16. About the rebellion she had crushed. About the assassination attempts, the betrayals, the endless parade of people who wanted her dead or controlled. She had won every battle. Destroyed every enemy. Built an empire that none dared challenge openly. And she was completely, utterly alone. That night at dinner, Solara did something unprecedented. She dismissed all servants and ate with Daniel in private, in her personal chambers rather than the formal dining hall. The meal was simple by imperial standards. Tell me about your garden, she said. Daniel blinked in surprise. My garden? You mentioned it when we first met. You wanted to return to it. What do you grow? So he told her. About tomatoes and carrots and the satisfaction of watching things grow. About the peace of working with soil. About how gardening taught patience because you could not rush nature. Solara listened, and for the first time in decades, allowed herself to simply enjoy a conversation that had nothing to do with politics, war, or power. When Daniel left that evening, she stood by her window, looking out over her fortress empire, and in the distance she wondered what it would be like to grow something instead of constantly defending everything. It was a dangerous thought. But perhaps, she admitted to herself, dangerous thoughts were not always wrong. The state dinner was supposed to be routine. Representatives from 12 different star systems, all paying tribute and respect to the Empire. Daniel attended because Solara insisted, though he felt out of place among the nobles in their expensive clothes and carefully practiced smiles. He noticed the assassins before anyone else did. Years of combat had taught him to read a room. The servant who moved wrong, too tense. The guard whose eyes tracked targets instead of scanning for threats. The noble who positioned himself near the kitchen entrance. Daniel cataloged them all, his body shifting into combat readiness while his face remained calm. The attack came during the third course. Poison gas released from hidden canisters. Panic erupted instantly. Guards rushed toward Solara, forming a protective wall. Nobles screamed and stampeded for exits, and through the chaos Daniel saw 3 figures moving with purpose toward a group of civilian servants trapped against a far wall. He did not think. Thinking got people killed. He moved. Daniel crossed the room at a dead run, putting himself between the assassins and the servants. The first attacker came at him with a blade designed to pierce armor. Daniel deflected it with his forearm, feeling the edge slice through his jacket and into flesh. Pain came later. Action came first. He caught the assassin's wrist, twisted, and used the attacker's momentum to throw him into his companion. The third assassin had a projectile weapon. Daniel grabbed a serving tray and used it as a shield, the metal denting from impacts as he closed distance. 3 steps, 2. He drove the tray edge into the shooter's throat, then swept the legs. The entire fight lasted 12 seconds. Imperial guards finally reached the scene, securing the surviving assassins. Medical staff rushed in. Daniel noticed blood dripping from his arm. Quite a lot of it, actually, and felt suddenly dizzy. "You idiot." Solara's voice cut through the fog. She was there, her hands glowing with healing energy as she pressed them against his wound. "You absolute reckless idiot," the servants Daniel managed. "Are they safe?" "They are fine." "You are not." Her golden eyes blazed with fury and something else, something that looked almost like fear. "Why would you do something so monumentally stupid?" "Could not let them die." His vision was blurring. "Not again. Not when I could stop it." Solara worked faster, her healing abilities knitting torn flesh and severed blood vessels. Around them, guards secured the room. Ambassador Torrin was shouting orders, but the Empress focused entirely on keeping Daniel alive, pouring her energy into his failing body. "Stay awake," she commanded. "That is an imperial order. Pulling rank on me?" Daniel smiled weakly. "Not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Stay with me, human." He did, barely. The healing took 20 minutes that felt like hours. When Solara finally finished, her scales had lost some of their shine, exhausted from the effort. Daniel's arm was whole, but he felt like he had been hit by a transport vehicle. "The servants you saved were children," Solara said quietly, helping him to a chair. 12 and 14 years old. They only started working in the palace last month. Good kids. They did not panic. You took a blade meant for them. I have taken blades before. They have not. Daniel looked up at her, his vision clearing. "You are angry. I am furious. You could have died. But I did not." Solara grabbed his shoulders, her grip tight enough to hurt. "Every person who has tried to protect me has betrayed me eventually." They wanted something. "Power, influence, leverage." "You protected servants who can offer you nothing." "Why?" Daniel met her golden eyes steadily. "Because I have stood by and watched innocent people die. I have followed orders that cost civilian lives. I have made choices that still wake me at night. I cannot take those back. But I could stop this, so I did." The Empress released him and turned away, her whole body rigid. "You are either the most genuine person I have ever met, or the most skilled manipulator. I am too tired to manipulate anyone." "I can barely stand." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The others tried to prove themselves by challenging me, by demonstrating their strength against me. You proved yourself by protecting those beneath you. That is what strength is for, protecting people who cannot protect themselves." Solara turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "I have been emperor for 60 years. I have commanded armies, destroyed rebellions, and crushed enemies without mercy. Everyone fears me. Everyone respects my power. But you look at me and see something else." "I see someone very tired," Daniel said honestly. "Someone who has been fighting alone for too long. I remind you of yourself. You said that before. After my worst campaign, I came home angry at everything, trusting nothing, seeing threats everywhere. I survived the war, but I was not really alive anymore." The Empress sat beside him, her presence warm despite her scaled armor. "How did you recover?" "Slowly. I started small, grew a garden, learned to sleep through the night. Let my guard down inch by inch." He looked at his bandaged arm. "I am still recovering. Maybe I always will be, but I am better than I was. And you think I need to recover? I think you survived by becoming the scariest thing in the galaxy. That probably saved your life. But surviving is not the same as living." Solara was quiet for a long time. Around them, the palace had returned to lockdown. Guards everywhere, security tripled. The fortress had sealed itself again. But here, in this moment, something had changed between them. The month is not over, Salara said finally. You could still leave. I could, but you will not. It was not a question. Daniel smiled tiredly. Someone needs to tell you when you are being unreasonable. Might as well be me. The Dragon Empress, terror of the galaxy, looked at this scarred human who threw himself into danger to save children he did not know, and felt something crack in the armor she had worn for 60 years. Maybe she thought dangerous ideas were worth exploring after all. The month was ending. Across the galaxy, betting pools calculated odds on how Daniel would die or when he would flee. Political analysts predicted his departure would happen quietly. Another failed consort added to the Empress's list. The smart money said he had 3 days left at most. Daniel stood in the palace gardens such as they were, mostly decorative plants chosen for appearance rather than growth. He had spent the morning turning over soil in a corner plot, preparing it for actual vegetables. Salara found him there, dirt under his fingernails, looking more content than anyone had a right to be in an imperial fortress. You are gardening in my palace, she observed. Someone should. These decorative plants are beautiful but useless. At least tomatoes feed people. You have 3 days left. Then you are free to go. Daniel stood, brushing dirt from his hands. About that, I need to make a formal request. Salara's expression became carefully neutral. You want wealth? Land? A title? I want to stay. The Empress went absolutely still. What? I want to stay here with you. Daniel spoke calmly as if discussing the weather. Permanently, if you will have me. You cannot mean that. I do. Silara's scales rippled with agitation. You have seen what this life is. Constant danger. Isolation. Every day wondering who will try to kill you. Why would anyone choose this? Because you deserve better than being alone, Daniel said simply. You deserve someone who sees you, not your power. Someone who stays by choice, not ambition or fear. The Empress looked away, her voice tight. Everyone leaves eventually. Through death or betrayal or madness. I have accepted this. I am not everyone. The others said similar things. The others wanted something from you. I already have what I want. Salara turned back to him sharply. Which is? A life that matters. Purpose, someone worth protecting. Daniel stepped closer. I spent 20 years fighting wars for causes I barely understood. Then I spent 5 years hiding from everything in my garden. You gave me something I did not know I needed. A reason to be present again. I gave you danger and chaos. You gave me yourself. The real you, not the image. The person who works until dawn protecting her empire. Who healed me even though it exhausted you. Who listens when I talk about gardening because you genuinely want to understand. He smiled. You are terrible at relaxing and you have trust issues that could fill a library. But you are also brilliant, dedicated, and stronger than anyone I have ever met. Why would I leave that? Salara's golden eyes were suspiciously bright. You are insane. Probably. Most soldiers are. I could destroy you. You could. But you will not. How can you possibly know that? Daniel took her hand, scaled and warm. Because I see how you try not to care. How you keep everyone at distance to protect yourself. But you do care. You care so much it terrifies you. That is why you healed me. Why you ask about my garden. Why you are arguing with me right now instead of just accepting my request. The Empress was trembling, something that would have shocked anyone who knew her reputation. Everyone I have ever cared about has been taken from me. My family. My friends, everyone. Caring is a weakness I cannot afford. Caring is not weakness. Isolation is. You built walls so high that nothing could hurt you. But those same walls keep out everything good too. You do not understand what you are asking. Then explain it to me. Salara pulled her hands away and turned, her whole body tense. If you stay, you become a target. Every enemy I have made in 60 years will see you as leverage. They will try to hurt you to hurt me. They will never stop coming. Then we will face them together. I will have to protect you constantly, or we protect each other. That is how partnerships work. She spun back to face him. Why? Why would you choose this life? You could have anything. Peace, safety, freedom. Instead, you want to stay in a fortress with the most feared being in the galaxy? Daniel smiled gently. Because the most feared being in the galaxy deserves to be happy. And I think I can help with that if you let me. The Dragon Empress, who had stared down armies without flinching, who had crushed rebellions and destroyed enemies without mercy, stood in her garden and felt tears forming. I do not know how to do this. How to trust. How to let someone close. Neither do I. We can figure it out together. That is a terrible plan. Most of my plans are terrible, but they work. Silara laughed through the tears, a broken, genuine sound. You are absolutely insane. So you said. Is that a yes? She looked at him for a long moment. This strange human who had walked into her fortress expecting death and instead offered life. Who protected children, grew gardens, and somehow saw past 60 years of armor to the person underneath. If you stay, I will not go easy on you. You will have duties, responsibilities. The court will test you constantly. I can handle it. They will try to manipulate you, use you against me. I am bad at politics, but good at seeing through nonsense. I will manage. You will have to marry me. Officially, in front of the entire galaxy. Daniel grinned. Is that supposed to scare me away? I am committing to staying with you permanently. Marriage is just paperwork. Silara closed the distance between them, her presence overwhelming. You are truly certain about this? I have never been more certain of anything. The Empress took a deep breath, then nodded once. Then by imperial authority, I accept your request. We will formalize this within the week. News spread across the galaxy within hours. The human veteran who had willingly chosen to marry the Dragon Empress. Analysts could not explain it. Nobles were shocked. Other humans were mortified. But in the palace, servants whispered to each other with cautious hope. Maybe, they thought, things were finally changing. That evening, Daniel and Silara stood together on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The fortress empire spread below them, beautiful and terrible. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Terrified, Daniel admitted. But some things are worth being afraid for. The Dragon Empress leaned against him slightly, allowing herself that small vulnerability. And for the first time in 60 years, she felt something other than alone. 6 months had passed since the wedding that shocked the galaxy. The ceremony had been broadcast to trillions, every moment analyzed and dissected. When the officiant asked Daniel to swear eternal obedience to the throne, he had politely declined and offered different vows instead. I swear to stand beside you as an equal, to challenge you when you are wrong, to support you when you are right, and to never let you face the darkness alone again. The court had gasped. Nobles whispered frantically. Ambassador Torin had looked ready to faint. But Silara, after the longest pause in diplomatic history, had smiled and accepted. Now Daniel walked through the palace corridors with confidence born from belonging rather than permission. Servants greeted him warmly. Guards nodded with genuine respect. He had become something unexpected in the imperial fortress, a bridge between the throne and the people. The trade delegation from the outer reaches is waiting, Silara said, reviewing reports in their shared study. She had moved her workspace to include him, something that had caused considerable gossip. The farmers who want better shipping rates? Daniel asked, setting down his own datapad. The same. They claim current imperial tariffs are destroying their economy. They are probably right. I looked at the numbers. The tax structure was designed 50 years ago for industrial worlds, not agricultural ones. Daniel pulled up a chart. If we adjust the rates based on planetary output rather than flat percentages, they will actually pay more in total but have enough margin to survive. Silara studied his proposal, her tactical mind running calculations. This would set a precedent. Other worlds will demand similar considerations. Good. Fair policy should not be the exception. She looked at him with something between exasperation and affection. You are making me reasonable. This is very inconvenient for maintaining my terrifying reputation. You can still be terrifying, just terrifying and fair. Their work was interrupted by alarms. Daniel was on his feet instantly, old combat instincts flaring. Silara shifted partially into her dragon form, scales spreading across her skin, preparing for battle. Report, she commanded through the communication system. Armed intrusion, Sector 7. Multiple hostiles. They are heading for the residential wing. Daniel and Silara moved together, their coordination practiced from months of training exercises. She had insisted he learn to fight beside her properly. He had insisted she learn to trust backup. They reached the residential sector to find a firefight in progress. This attack was more sophisticated than the last. Professional soldiers, well-armed, moving with tactical precision. They had breached 3 security layers, which should have been impossible. Inside help, Daniel said quietly, reading the situation. Agreed, Silara growled. Take the left corridor. Drive them toward the central junction. They split up, each trusting the other completely. Daniel moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, not engaging directly but herding the attackers into Solara's path. She came through like a force of nature, her dragon form barely contained in the palace spaces, overwhelming the intruders with raw power. The fight lasted 8 minutes. When it ended, they had captured 6 attackers alive. Solara stood over them in full dragon form, magnificent and terrifying. Then she shifted back to humanoid, barely winded. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The lead attacker, bleeding but defiant, spat at her feet. "The Empress has grown soft, weakened by human influence. You are not fit to rule anymore." Daniel stepped forward, his voice cold. "She just fought off 6 armed soldiers without breaking a sweat. Which part of that seemed weak?" "She wastes time on reforms, on listening to complaints, on being fair," the attacker sneered. "The Empire was built on strength, not kindness." Solara looked down at him with golden eyes that had seen too much. "Strength without wisdom is just violence. Violence builds nothing lasting. My consort taught me this. Your human pet has made you weak," the attacker insisted. Daniel crouched down to the attacker's level. "I served in military combat for 20 years. I have seen empires built on pure strength. Do you know what happens to them? They collapse the moment that strength falters because fear only works until someone stops being afraid. But respect, fairness, and genuine loyalty last." The attacker had no response to that. Over the following weeks, the investigation revealed a conspiracy among a faction of nobles who believed the Empress's recent reforms were destroying imperial power. They had expected their attack to prove her weakness. Instead, it had demonstrated exactly the opposite. Solara addressed the Imperial Council personally. Daniel stood beside her, not behind. Equal partners facing the galaxy. "Change is not weakness," the Empress declared. "Adaptation is strength. For 60 years I ruled through fear because it was necessary. But fear is a tool, not a foundation. This empire will become something better, stronger because it is just powerful because it is respected, not simply feared." One of the older governors raised a concern. "Empress, these reforms will cost us in the short term. Reduced revenues, increased autonomy for outer worlds. Our military superiority will be challenged." Daniel spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of experience. "I have fought in wars across dozens of worlds. Do you know what makes an army truly unbeatable? Soldiers who fight because they believe in something, not because they are forced. Give your people reason to believe in this empire, and you will have more strength than any amount of forced compliance could provide." The council debated for hours, but the Empress and her consort held firm. Reforms would continue. The empire would evolve. That evening, Daniel found Solara in the garden he had started 6 months ago. The tomato plants were thriving now, spreading across multiple plots. Other vegetables had joined them, even some flowers which Solara had insisted on adding. "You changed everything," she said softly, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. "We changed everything," Daniel corrected. "I could not have done this alone. Neither could I." She leaned against him, allowing herself that closeness that once seemed impossible. "Do you regret it? Staying?" "Not for a second. Even with the attempts on your life? The political complications? The endless work?" Daniel smiled. "I traded a quiet life for a meaningful one. I found partnership instead of isolation. I discovered that the most feared being in the galaxy just needed someone to stand beside her instead of behind her." He took her hand. "Best decision I ever made." Solara looked at their joined hands, scales and skin, dragon and human. "The galaxy still does not understand us. They will, or they will not. Either way, we know the truth, which is that strength and compassion are not opposites. That power is better used to build than destroy, and that even dragons need someone to share the sunset with." The Dragon Empress smiled, genuine and unguarded. Somewhere in the palace, servants noticed and spread the word. The empire was changing slowly but surely, and at its heart were 2 unlikely partners who had found something neither expected. Not power or glory or conquest. Just 2 scarred souls learning to live instead of merely survive, together facing whatever came next. The galaxy watched in wonder as the impossible became reality. The Dragon Empress had not destroyed another consort. She had found an equal, and the empire would never be the same.